This is Dave Knows MMA!
As per usual, there's never any shortage of topics to discuss when it comes to the sport of MMA. Even on what would seem like the dullest of weeks due to lack of events or seemingly lackluster events, there's always something cropping up. It could be a high-profile fighter failing a drug test, an unlikely impressive performance from an underdog, or some kind of out-of-the-cage antic making the headlines. There's always something going on. This past weekend, we got all three of said possibilities. To say that at the forefront of it all is a fighter that is no stranger to being in the headlines would be a major understatement. Of course we are talking about Conor McGregor. As if you all haven't heard already, at Bellator 187 in Dublin, Ireland this past weekend, McGregor caused quite the stir when he raced towards the cage and hopped inside to celebrate with his teammate. When you heard it put like that, it doesn't really sound all that bad. However, it was all that bad because he entered that cage against all rules and regulations and was not a licensed cornerman for his friend and teammate Charlie Ward. The way in which he flew in there, coupled with the fact that he has a little bit of history with the ref, Mark Goddard, ended up being a recipe for disaster. Depending on who you are, of course. For Bellator, there probably couldn't have been a better scenario as far as ratings and must-see TV is concerned. But for a lot of fans of the sport and for both competitors in that bout, it was less than ideal. Things basically blew up right away when Goddard stepped forward, putting his hand on McGregor's chest, telling him to get out as he wasn't supposed to be there. There's room for argument on whether or not Goddard pushed Conor or not, but in my opinion, it wasn't really an aggressive move on the ref's part, and I wouldn't consider it a push or a shove. He was doing his job, trying to restore some order in the cage. The problem is that it had the reverse effect, and it was that very gesture that spiraled things out of control altogether. Conor lost his grip and went absolutely crazy, charging at Goddard when the ref's back was turned and pushing him, followed by screaming and pointing and having to be restrained by the Athletic Commission and Bellator officials. On a couple of occasions throughout the dust-up, Conor got very close to Goddard in an aggressive manner, screaming God knows what. Eventually things got separated and McGregor was out of the cage. When I first saw that footage, I chuckled to myself, thought it was crazy and drank it in just as everybody else did. But I then found myself starting to wonder if things are starting to get a bit out of control with the Notorious One. All things considered, at least from the outside looking in, taking into account the rise of McGregor and the money and fame that he's come into in such a short period of time, so far he's kept it together quite well. But for the first time ever, I started being concerned on whether or not we were going down a bad road here. For me, there's no excuse for that behavior and it was out of line. But I figured it was something that, one way or another, would just be swept under the rug and just another blip on the radar. But that was until the footage emerged of Conor being on top of the cage from the outside, doing some jawing, and when an official came forward to get him off, Conor open palm slapped him, and hard. The way in which the official handled the situation definitely could have been better. It almost looked as though he was trying to push McGregor off, which makes the reaction understandable, but it doesn't change the fact that it happened, and that it is still a legitimate assault. This makes things much more difficult in terms of McGregor getting off with a slap on the wrist. Needless to say, if we were talking about anybody else but McGregor, the hammer would be coming down, and hard. But it's hard to believe that McGregor would face any meaningful discipline over anything like this, because he's the biggest star in the game, and that the UFC absolutely needs him, and it's in their best interest for this problem to just go away. The lead regulator for Bellator 187, Mike Mazzulli, was just on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani saying that he fully intends to do whatever he can in his power to punish Conor for his actions. Whether or not he has the power to do much of anything at all isn't really clear at this time, but he made it known he has full intentions on taking action. He also said that the UFC officials have been in contact with him and that they stated that they intend to punish McGregor. But as bad as the whole situation was, I think that ultimately McGregor is going to get a pass on this one and resume as if it never happened at all. After jumping through some hoops, of course. However, as a huge fan of his, I find myself starting to wonder if this will be the ceiling in terms of getting into trouble. I sure hope it is. It would be a shame to see another elite talent and star in this sport go down the wrong path and deprive not only himself, but the fans of a lot of greatness. But as Mr. Mazzulli stated, McGregor is not bigger than MMA. Conor may not be here in 5 years, but MMA will be. Hopefully this is as bad as the outside the cage problems get, and that he can move forward with his career relatively unscathed. Because though it may not seem this way right now, no matter how big a star may be and how powerful he is at this time, the straw that breaks the camel's back exists for everyone, including Conor McGregor.